You're listening to Where You Live with Gene Sullivan.
Welcome back. This is Where You Live. I'm Gene Sullivan, broadcasting from the True North Painting Studios. The show is also brought to you by American Family Insurance, the Kim Bennett Agency, and Extreme Exteriors. Before we get to our next story, I'd like to let our listeners know we've got a free gift for you. We put together a bi-monthly newsletter. It's yours free for the asking. A lot of what you'll hear on the radio show, we cover in further detail. Folks that we have on the show are also writers for this newsletter. All you have to do is give us a call during the week at New Concepts at 952-2500. Ask for Lori. She'll make sure that you start receiving your free subscription either electronically or by mail. You know, and before we get to that, our next story here, just an enclosure here with, we talked with City Council member, what is it, Siobhan Akers, who had mentioned that she thought the association ought to have a greater responsibility to notify a homeowner before foreclosing, and she thought that maybe a phone call would be in order. And I certainly do agree with trying to do measures like that. I don't know if requiring it would be a good idea. When you stop and think about it, how many people have a phone number that's listed? I think it's less than 35% of people who have phone numbers have them publicly listed, so you wouldn't be able to necessarily get that information anyway if the person didn't give it to you, and the person wouldn't give it to you if they didn't realize they were in a home. They didn't think they were living in a homeowners association. So I don't know if that would necessarily take care of it in that particular case. And I can think of one story with one gentleman who was next door to the board president of an association that I served for a number of years. And this board president, folks, was probably one of the most genteel, diplomatic men I've ever met in my life. And the guy next door had got behind in his homeowner association dues, and the board president just gently went over there and gave a reminder. The person was so offended, so angry. He said, "Don't you dare ever try talking to me personally. You can send things by mail or not at all." And, you know, you take a look at the state requirement. The only thing that's required is that person living in an association give the address where you want information to go to be notified when you're living in a HOA. And so some of those other things, I don't know if that would work here. Well, anyway, good luck to Council Member Akers in trying to get people notified. Well, we've got another great story, but the person that I want to get their opinion on is a person who is a great friend of the show. He's been on so many times before. You love him when he's on. Mr. Dan Greenstein, attorney with Bernick Lifson. Hi, Dan.
Hello, Gene. How are you?
Good. And how are you doing?
Doing well. And let me just put in my 2 cents while I've got your ear. Anybody whose unit or home is being foreclosed on receives multiple notices and is normally personally served before the foreclosure sale ever happens.
Yeah.
So I take a little bit of issue with the rare exception where someone had no idea or was mistaken about whether they're in an association.
Well, and that was the story we were just talking to in this particular case, Dan. The person said they didn't know that they lived in an association, but the association sent letters over a 6-year period of time, certified and otherwise. And the person never opened up one of them.
Well, that's very interesting, and in every other area of the law, ignorance of the law is not a defense or is not taken into account.
Yeah, well, I agree, and I think this council member agreed to that too. She said this person isn't off from any kind of responsibility. She just, people I think get down to it, they think of, well, a homeowners association is supposed to be more neighborly and friendly. You think people would try to personally reach out more. But I don't.
Okay.
But I don't know.
I understand.
And that's a good point. But I don't know that you can require that of an association in terms of having something being considered proper notice.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, here's something that's real interesting. Out of Minnesota, it was a case recently before the Minnesota Court of Appeals. It was with the Cedar Bluff Townhome Association. They had an issue with their insurance company and with a claim they couldn't find siding that would match. The insurance company dug their heels in and said, we're only going to take care of replacing the parts that are damaged, and the fact that it doesn't completely match, that's not a big deal with us or our responsibility. Dan, tell us more. What happened after that?
Well, that's really a common issue where a storm will come through and it will damage the roofs or the siding. And, after a number of years, it's virtually impossible to match the exact same color of the siding or the roofing shingles.
Sure.
A lot of times the manufacturers stop making them or they change colors. And, if you're the association, you're in a position where, well, wait a minute, we can't have two different colors to our siding. And I think most people would think that under their insurance policy, if they can't match the color, what has to happen is the insurance company has to pay for all new residing, so you've got one type of siding on your units.
That's right. But in this case, it was with American Family. American Family said, we don't think so.
That's right. They challenged it, and they said basically that under the language of the contract of insurance, that they didn't have an obligation to replace the boards that weren't directly damaged by the storm. So they said, we're going to give you enough money to fix the boards that were damaged, but we're not going to pay you to replace everything, even though it doesn't matter.
So what happened next? There was quite a volleying. It went back and forth a number of times, right?
Of course. In the typical insurance policy, if the insured party and the insurance company can't agree on the damage or the value of loss, they are normally required to go through an arbitration. And the way the arbitration works is that each side appoints an appraiser to go in and value the loss or the damage, and those two appraisers pick a third appraiser. So you've got three appraisers that sit and meet and look at the property and decide what the value of the loss is. So in this particular case, the appraisers on their own decided that, well, because the siding cannot be matched, the value of the loss is the cost of replacing all of the siding with comparable materials of like kind and quality.
So they came down on the side of the association on this.
They did. They said everything has to match, and therefore you've got to replace all the siding, not just the siding that was directly damaged.
And then what happened next was American Family challenged it, and it went to appeals court, right?
Well, first it goes to the district court.
Oh, district court, that's right.
Right, and this was in Dakota County, and the district court sided with the insurance company. And they said the appraisers don't get to decide what, under the law, what's covered under the policy. And as a result, they went beyond the scope of their job, determining the value of the loss, and they decided a legal issue, which was whether or not the association was entitled to replacement of all of their siding.
Yeah. And then
so, course,
after that...
Of course. So then the association appealed, and the Court of Appeals in Minnesota went through a long analysis, but the bottom line is they said in the contract of insurance, the language said that the insurance company is going to replace the damaged siding with other property of like kind and quality and of comparable materials and quality. And the court said this gives the appraisers the right to decide the coverage question, whether or not that the loss, they had to measure the loss. And the court said part of measuring the loss is determining what has to be replaced.
Yep.
So the court basically went through this interpretation and said, you know what, we've got to use the contract of insurance has to be interpreted in the ordinary sense and what a reasonable person would understand those terms to mean. And basically they said, we're going with the appraisers.
Yep. Well, I want to talk about that a little bit more, but we need to take a break right now. You can stay with us for our final segment, can't you?
Yes, I can.
Great. We're talking to attorney Dan Greenstein about a very interesting case that went to the Minnesota Court of Appeals and has big consequences if you live in an HOA. We'll talk about that after these messages.